My name is Zach Dennis. I'm an editor at the Charlotte Observer. I'm going to let everybody introduce themselves as we go around, but I wanted to start first with just a quick, reflection on the movie that just ended. Théoden, you want to start us off?
Sure. Is this thing on?
Hello?
Yep, you're good.
Thanks, Zach. Yeah, I'm Théoden Janes. I'm a reporter at the Charlotte Observer. Just got blinded by the light. I've been with the Observer. We're supposed to introduce ourselves a little bit. We're good. I've been at the Observer now. It'll be 20 years in August. I expect a pretty good gift. I need a new watch. I am a features and I guess entertainment reporter. I cover, what would we call it? I mean, I think that I do something that's a little bit different from what we saw on screen there. I don't like to refer to features as soft journalism, but what I would say is that I like to write stories about kind of the lived experience of people who live in Charlotte and the surrounding area. Human interest is maybe one way that you could put it, but I, as opposed to what would we call this, speaking truth to power, I think, like I said, I like to speak truth to individuals, lived experiences, and tell stories about people that help the people around them kind of understand the people around them and the city that they live in. I think, so my immediate reaction to the movie, I would say that I have a great amount of admiration for her nerve and her courage and her bravery in telling stories that she wants to tell. I guess what I would say is, again, being a kind of a different type of journalist, the only thing that makes me, I guess, uncomfortable about the type of independent journalism that she does is that, she kind of toes that line between traditional journalism. She is not a traditional journalist, but between what I think of as traditional journalism and activism and as a traditional journalist, that just makes me a little bit uncomfortable. But I think that independent journalism is an important part, and the type that she does is an important part of the sort of overall media ecosystem. Because, as the title of the movie says, Steal the Story, Please, I think that she does the types of stories and talks to, and gives voice to the voiceless in a way that a lot of times traditional media companies need to pick up on, I would say.
Jennifer?
Jennifer Moxley. I own Sunshine Media Network here in Charlotte. I've been an entrepreneur in media and storytelling for 14 years. Prior to that, I worked at 2 newspapers where I believe real journalism begins. I have a huge admiration for radio, so I was happy to see Amy Goodman started in radio. It is really intimate and community oriented. And then I worked in Charlotte local news at WBTV and then at Spectrum. So I was both a producer and a one-man band. As corporate America said, you don't need a crew to tell a story, we'll just make one person do the whole thing. So my career as a Gen Xer over the past 25 years has been the reductions of the media, of newsrooms, of support, of thought leadership. So Théoden being here for 20 years, me being in media for 25 years, we're rare breeds, and I look to those with even more experience, not having access to that knowledge base. I'm what I would consider a bulldog journalist, both professionally and in my personal life. So if I hear something at the bar that's happening, I'm speed dialing a reporter, I'm messaging people locally and nationally. I worked with Amy Goodman and Democracy Now! When the DNC came to Charlotte. I left local news and took the leap to freelance, and Democracy Now! Was one of the first projects I was able to work on. And I mean, what a compliment to be in the space of someone fighting for stories. We broadcast live from Packard Place. I think it even speaks to Amy Goodman and her team that they hired me, a woman, in broadcast news, and my partner at the time was a Black man, a TV engineer. That even is an act of resistance in the landscape of my peers. So her broadcasting from Charlotte, some of the interviews are still online. I highly encourage you to watch them. It's depressing how the stories are the same, much like we saw in the film. It's the same thing over and over again. So I think that part is hard to swallow. There's a little bit of fatigue that we tend to, how does she do it? How does she keep going? And also hope, because one person, one story, one person sharing their testimony can change the system. One life can move the needle. And just deep admiration for her showing up and her team showing up.
Matt?
Matt Leclercq, and actually, well, I'm the editor of the Charlotte Observer, and it's been 1 week since I got here. I'm moved here, I'm thrilled to be here. I lived in North Carolina most of my life. Went to high school in Hendersonville to the west, and then I went to UNC, and then I lived in Fayetteville. Well, that was my first job at the Fayetteville Observer, and I was going to be there for just a summer, and then I ended up staying for almost 20 years. And I was the editor there, and then I did a few moves since 2019 to Texas, then to DC, and back to Texas. I was at Fort Worth, and now I'm back here in Charlotte. And I thought the film was, I have many emotions. I'm kind of, it makes you angry, but also completely inspired. And I mean, besides just that she's such a remarkable person. But my main takeaway was that the world needs journalists. North Carolina needs journalists. Charlotte needs journalists. I may butcher her exact quote, but we need people who show up and ask the right questions, not just on the world stage or at the office of Chevron, which is pretty badass, but in City Hall in Charlotte, in your neighborhoods, asking those tough questions. And I also liked the beginning of the film where she's chasing that guy during the climate, and she's running out of breath and going up staircases, and he's not answering any of her questions, ignoring her, and finally, the door. And I feel like anyone who's been in journalism knows what that's like, even metaphorically. We are constantly chasing people who don't want to talk to us, or just chasing answers to important problems or questions in our communities. So I thought that was a very interesting start to the film, but it also showed how, that was the first few minutes. She does not give up. She never gives up, and that's what's most important, I think, about what we're doing today. And the film really didn't get into a lot of detail over what's happened over the past couple of years in this country. So you can imagine that it's more important now than ever.
Absolutely. I think saying it makes you angry but inspired is a good way of describing most days working in the newsroom. Jennifer, I wanted to go back to your experience working with Amy at the DNC. We just spent an hour and a half with her. What was that experience like for you? What did you see? What did you notice? What was different about her?
From my experience working with the team, this is how it is. She's even-keeled, matter of fact, leans in. I struggle even to say asking the tough questions, because for me, it's asking the obvious questions that people are scared to ask. It's not even a tough question. It's what we're all wondering. Most people just avoid that awkwardness of putting someone on the spot, or what could feel like an exploitive lean in, when really the people that she interviews and the people putting themselves out to the media, they owe us that. You want the exposure, we want to know information. She definitely has a calm sense about her, which I wish I could pull more from. I get so fired up and so passionate and have so much adrenaline that I remember watching. We also went to DC and covered the Scientists for Climate, or science activists marches, and she just was so even-keeled, and I thought, how can she be so invested and be so removed? And when you're asking questions of someone and you don't have what appears to be an outcome already in mind, people tend to try to figure out what direction you're going, and she has that way about her that is really something that should be studied, and I wish I could do more of that. I definitely appreciated the guerrilla style media coverage. The budget was little. We were working with, bubble gum and shoestring. And, when I started in newspaper at a tri-weekly and was waxing headlines on the newspaper, I remember thinking, oh, the Observer folks, it'll be different when I get to the Observer level or the TV stations. And it really isn't. And so for them to still be at that level of, bubble gum and Band-Aids, and putting out good content and truthful content, that also is something that journalists have to just know that this is how it's going to be.
Not to lean on your age a little bit, Théoden, but you remember the waxing on the newspapers more than I would. What has been your impression as you've gone through your career, especially the last 20 years in Charlotte, on just you could probably go through a laundry list of the changes that we've seen in how news is produced. But for you, what do you reflect on the most about it?
Say that one more time.
On what has changed?
Well, so I did, so I spent the first 10 years of my career at 4 other newspapers. And so I was in composing rooms quite a bit, which you know.
I used to wax her.
Matt? I don't know, Zach? No. And yeah, so just to explain to people who might not know, we used to, paste up the newspaper in a composing room with X-Acto knives, and what did they even call the film that came out of those things?
I didn't get that far.
No?
I was on the waxing machine.
So if the story came out of the whatever it was called and it was too long for the page, they would literally take an X-Acto knife and cut it off at the end. As far as so this is a difficult question to answer. What has changed over the 20 years that I've been at the paper? I mean, there have been some obvious things having to do more with less. But I think that the biggest change has been more with less, but technology for sure. In the sense that I think that when I started, all you really had to worry about as a reporter was reporting the story and writing the story. And now we do about 8 other things on top of that. Several of which have to do with technology in terms of, trying to, and they all have to do, I think, with either creating or building or maintaining an audience for the content that you're creating. And that includes everything from, search engine optimization to writing headlines, to creating, powerful or helping to produce powerful visual elements for the story, because the whole game really now is to get people to read what you're creating. That is really the whole game. We used to be able to do that, or we thought we used to be able to do that just by reporting and writing. we had no sense back then of really how many people were reading what we were writing. And now we do, and we have to sort of, and Matt, you can talk about this more, but we have to find a balance between getting people to read our content in the first place, but doing it in a way that stays is responsible and not creating clickbait.
I would say, I don't know how old you are.
52.
Okay. We're close. I would say everything's changed since I started for the same reasons that you described. It's interesting to see. I mean, I feel like I went back through my whole, the 7 years of my career and watching the events in this film. But it's also interesting how, remember when she asked the young guy, go through this stack of papers and clip out everything about Iraq. And that's how that was research back then. I don't remember what year it was, but maybe they didn't have Google or AI. They certainly didn't have AI. Now, all the technology has changed. It's a blessing and it's a curse. It's a blessing in that we get a 10,000 PDF public record dump of something super important, and we have tools that can find the information in there very quickly. It's a curse in that, well, how AI and technology is changing not just our industry, but the world. It's not just media and traditional news that is, AI and big tech is changing how you're able to find our content and what happens to our content. And you pull up Google and you do a search for something, you no longer perhaps see a story that we did about that topic 2 months ago. You see these summarizations, and and that's a whole other thing. Our industry is really trying to take that on, and prevent those companies from basically stealing our content. Yeah, so but it's also very exciting because especially in media, things are changing so fast, and it's really an opportunity to kind of rewrite the playbook while at the same time, what's at stake is the mission. And throughout the whole film, that everything changed through history and her whole course of her career, but what didn't change, that was her mission from the very beginning, to fight for truth, to hold hold powerful people accountable, and no matter the medium or the technology or whatever's the administration or whatever it is, and that's really what I see is my chief responsibility, and all of our responsibility here is that we have to keep fighting, and at the same time finding like a new path forward to use technology and AI to our advantage, to keep it going.
Yeah, I think you see it. We can sit here and talk a long time about the changes that have happened and how things used to be done, and how it's a lot more difficult to do our jobs nowadays. But I think you saw at the end of the movie, with the world that we're in right now, it's ripe for the strong journalism, not only on the national front, but also on the local front. You've seen in the last few weeks we've had such massive stories, the mayor resigning, the switch on the I-77 toll vote. You've seen a lot of collective action and change happening that I think it's exciting to come into work and be a part of that nowadays. You mentioned, we talked a little bit before about the DNC being in Charlotte. That was such a flashpoint in Charlotte's history, especially recent history, and it's changed so dramatically since then. What is, are we asking collectively as media, are we asking the right questions that need to be asked at this period in time in Charlotte? Jennifer, I'm gonna start with you.
I think a better question, not to criticize your question, the question I would have liked you to ask. I think that we need to find the right people in Charlotte and listen to what they're saying. And the biggest obstacle in Charlotte is that there's so much change in Charlotte. So we have a lot of new people coming. We don't know our neighbors. The people who've been here a long time sometimes get pushed into the background. And so just what we saw in the film, our journalists in this city who also have a lot of rotation because it's an expensive city, journalism isn't paid very well, and it's one of those leapfrog cities. So we come here, build our resume, and then go to a bigger city or go to where we're from. So we just have both ends working against us in Charlotte. If our journalists here can embed themselves in our neighborhoods, in our communities, in the pockets of knowledge, historically and also new, which is why I-77 turned out the way it did. I just saw a panel with a group of folks that it was the perfect storm of community, long-term journalism, political voice, and nonprofit advocacy. It was the perfect storm that helped the community have presence in the media with a voice. So we start with stories. All of you can tell your story. You have a video device in your hands. You have a global platform on your phone. Tell your stories. And it's our jobs as journalists, it's my job as a connector to connect you to the people with, as they say, ink by the barrel. So we all have a role in telling these stories and being the media. We also have a responsibility to be brave. And that means putting ourselves out there a little bit, being vulnerable, feeling stupid, being the outlier, being the first one to say something, asking that question that feels like a stupid question, but no one else asked and you wondered. And when that story gets out there, people start to slowly pay attention, and then it can get to the bigger place where the Charlotte Observer says, we can put this in the paper because enough people are interested in asking for it, and it will get us clicks, because ultimately, we all do have a bottom line to also maintain and check.
I want to open it up to some questions. Yeah. In the middle.
I have a two-part question. One, from your personal experience, what is the most controversial story you personally worked on, any of the reporters or all of you? And how hard was it when you were getting pushback and all the conflicts that you dealt with to go through that? That's my first question. The second question I have is, I personally cannot tell some of the truth anymore. We talk about, oh, we need to report the truth. If I see it with my own eyes, I may not even be seeing all the sides of the elephant per se. I am having a hard time knowing what's true. I know what's moral, I know what's right, I know how I was raised and all those sorts of things. But in terms of the news, we've got such controversy between the news and the editorial news outlets. It's hard to know. So two-part question. Your most controversial experience, got pushback, how did you survive it in terms of being a reporter? And then you can talk all you want about truth, but what is truth at this point?
Can I start? It's been many years since I was a reporter. So I think 2007. And I loved being a reporter. It was fun. Then I became an editor, and then I learned how to get my job satisfaction out of helping helping reporters do their stories. I would say towards the end of my reporting years, it was 2005, 2006 in Fayetteville, and I started digging into why we were seeing so many foreclosures. And again, we didn't have technology that made that a quick job. So it took a long time, but I compiled a database out of foreclosure deeds and I mapped it out. and I found like neighborhoods where there were these clusters, and everybody was foreclosed on, so they're not living there anymore, but I managed to track them down, and I got a kick-ass story about basically mortgage scam that we all saw was happening kind of everywhere and led to the housing crisis. My parents, my stepdad calls me all the time, and because he'll see headlines or news out there or something on Instagram, and he asked me if, like, is that true, or should I, what's your take on that? Because we are bombarded today with information, some of it good, some of it really fake, real fake news. And I think my advice is to know where you're getting the information from, i.e., the Charlotte Observer. I hope you trust the Charlotte Observer or other media organizations where you live. It's one of our biggest challenges, but it's also an opportunity for us, because we have that. I believe this institution has earned the credibility and the trust of this community over the many years that it's operated here. So that's what I say. Be skeptical of everything you read online or on social media, but if you know where you're getting your information from, and if we're doing a good job, you know who we are. You know the names of the people in our newsroom. Maybe they've come to your neighborhood community meeting and talked to you guys, or you've seen us out and about, and we're part of the community, and that's more important now than ever.
The most controversial thing I covered was a personal controversy more than anything. I almost witnessed a North Carolina execution when I was 22. I was working at the Salisbury Post, and I had covered multiple death penalty murder trials up to that point. I'm only 22. And I was like, oh yes, this warrants the death penalty, yes. And then I was selected to witness an execution and went to Central Prison for the prison tour. And in that room, just had a complete epiphany of, what are we doing? What is this? This does not seem just, and nor does it seem like our place as human beings who are seriously flawed in a country that is criminally flawed, in a justice system that was built on oppression. And that was controversial in my own mind of what else felt so right, what else felt like the truth. I'd heard these death penalty murder trial testimonies and crimes and saw the families, and it was true to me that it seemed like the right outcome. And then my truth became something different when I had new information. And seeing that firsthand, I wish we didn't have to know firsthand. I wish we could hear and believe and read, but we're human. And we do have to experience it. You do have to see me present before you take my information for what you're going to measure it as. We do need to hear Amy Goodman and see Amy Goodman multiple times before we give her credibility. And it's still on a shoestring. She can still cover something that we don't agree with, and that truth gets a little slanted. So the controversial stories for me have always been internally conflicting. I've always considered myself, if neither side is happy, I've done a great job, because I'm not here to win friends. I'm here to tell your story and your story and your story, and you all figure out what is that truth and where do you land on it.
Should we clap them out? Thanks for joining us. I want to make sure we get to other questions, but I'll just very quickly say the most controversial story I've written in recent memory is I reviewed a Kid Rock concert. I got it from both sides on that one. I do want to, before the next question, just really quickly mention that the one thing I left out of the what's changed, what are the biggest changes I've seen over the last 20 years. The other one is fragmentation of audience, and I would love to see. I know we have I'm sure we have kind of a media-friendly audience here for the most part, but how many people in here pay for the Charlotte Observer? How many people in here pay for like a national news source? Oh, and how many people in here pay for it's okay, another Charlotte news source that's not the Charlotte Observer? Interesting. Okay. Thanks.
Anyone else with a question?
I want to add to the death penalty execution. Thank God the Observer did an editorial that Governor Hunt had never commutated a sentence in his tenure, because Governor Hunt decided to commutate that particular sentence. There was a lot of murkiness to the execution, and I did not have to witness that. I think that would have drastically changed my life. I can't imagine how Amy Goodman experienced what she experienced and then continues to put herself in those situations. So the editorial really changed the trajectory of not just my life, but clearly the inmate who had been sentenced.
I'm interested in your views about corporate influence in journalism as a whole and the trajectory that you kind of have some thoughts about.
That's a good one for Matt.
I think we saw some of that towards the end of the film. We work for a company that under the ownership over, I guess it's been about 6 years, that McClatchy has been owned by the current ownership, and they've been investing in newsrooms. I wouldn't have come to because I was at USA Today when I made the move to Fort Worth, which is also McClatchy. But in my position, as an editor position in Fort Worth, was a newly created position. So they've been investing because in newsrooms with reporters, a few editors now and then. But I think I can say this. But in this year, I think we've added like 40 or something new reporter positions across our newsrooms. That's what, there's a lot of things happening with other companies, but I think that you're lucky to have a newsroom serving this city that is dedicated to that.
I think I'll.
If I could say something, as a freelance journalist, when I left local news, I became a national and international video freelancer, drastically affecting the freelance world and who has access to covering those kinds of stories. So many job cuts, so many cost cuts. I used to own an insert studio in Uptown Charlotte where any of you could be on national or international news to tell a story, and they cut that. Disney wanted to do a Skype interview for their Sunday news instead of book my studio for $800 for half an hour. So the cuts, and as alluded to in the film, Trump rode that wave. So we have cuts of freelance crews, cuts of storytellers, cuts of teams. We also have, cost cutting in the national level, and then here he is giving sound bites, just constantly creating clickable content. And in my experience covering his first election, which was my last national stint, because it did become violent, I was not safe, my equipment wasn't safe, my crews weren't safe, and CNN's not gonna cover that if something happens to me in my small business. I don't believe national and international media thought he would win. They thought he was just great content and intelligence would win, and it didn't go that way. And there's just been more and more and more and more cuts since. So this is why the community, the public, and your storytelling is so vital, because if you are so loud that you can't be ignored, then it will get to that place of being covered, just as Amy Goodman is trying to do with her platform. And also, the media is a space for privilege and access for a lot of people. I come from poverty, I was a teen mom, I put myself through college, I was one of the only people in my newsroom with children. I don't think Amy Goodman has children, I don't think she has a life outside of work. It is not built for people who don't have strong safety nets. Very few people get through without a safety net, which means media typically looks pretty homogenized and has very similar experiences. Here again, this is why the community storytelling is vital to informing and embedding our journalists into your stories.
I was just gonna say, also to speak more nationally, Fox is Fox. The purchase of CBS and Paramount is very extremely concerning, especially as you see a lot of the moves that are being made over there. It's even more concerning to see the Paramount Warner Brothers merger and what that means for CNN and places like that. It's extremely insurmountable. I think kind of going back to how things have changed though, and to what Jennifer's talking about, like there are a lot of access points nowadays. Not to say we have to ignore CNN now, or there's still use for things like that. But there's also a lot of people doing a lot of really good work on platforms that are non-traditional, and so being media literate and finding those places is key as well.
We do have time for one additional question if someone. I'll take both of the questions. I'll make it happen.
Thank you. I don't want to get into my question without simply saying thank you so much, all of you, for your sincerity and your heart, because this is not an easy job. And I also want to go back to your question about the truth and the idea of that you're guiding context, curating the truth in a certain way. And it takes me to what you started with, is that line between journalism and activism. And if we're in a time right now that we have to kind of reassess what those two things mean and how we bring it together, so that, because people just can't get all the information as hard as they work at it, and how to, you don't want to put your finger on the thumb, but how do you, you're on the scale, but how do you help people? It's like a new thing coming. It's got to be, if we're going to get there, it seems to me. I wonder what you might say about that.
I don't have any secret answer to having a healthy media diet. It's tough, I do think that, again, that there's so many different pathways now, and there are people who, the Charlotte Observer, it's impossible now to be everything for everybody. We talk about that a lot, where it's not like it was 50, 60 years ago where we can have everything for everybody. We kind of have to focus on the things that we can do best and deliver the best information on that people are looking for. And that's not to say that a lot of the stuff that we've had to let go is, there's no interest in it. People, there's nothing there for people. But there's also, I wrote down the thing you mentioned, having a local news ecosystem. The way that I approach news now is less that I'm going to get everything from the Charlotte Observer, but I'm going to look at WFAE and they cover a lot of things better than us. I'm going to look at WSOC and they bring stuff that's different from us. You look at something like Michael Graff's newsletter, the Charlotte Optimist, and they bring a level of storytelling that we don't have, and it all kind of works together, in one big pot. And I think that's good, as journalists, finding ways to read and support everybody. I don't feel like it's as cutthroat competitive as it used to be, just because from us to radio to TV to freelance to Substacks, everybody's kind of having to fight, and there's just that overall pressure above that makes just the basics of the job really difficult. And so that's I think finding what everybody can kind of offer and building more of a robust media diet that way is probably the best way to do things. But that's also not perfect, and it's also difficult, and there's holes in that as well.
I'll just add to that. What you consider truth on a particular issue may differ from what other people can legitimate. You you could have 6 people over for dinner and respectfully disagree on on a particular issue. And I've always seen it, you know, every story that we do is trying to get closer to that truth. And again, we may never see eye to eye, but I feel like what our job is to, especially on an important issue that's happening here, is to just keep having like a conversation where you may not always agree with what other people think on the issue or maybe the issue itself, but through our reporting, you understand it better. You can understand other people's points of view, at least understand why they feel that way. And you know, something that just doesn't happen very much anymore in this country is just listening and having perspective and wanting to have a perspective and understand why other people may disagree with you on something. So.
There was a mention in the film that, you know, things are so dire that middle isn't an option, neutrality isn't an option. I think there are tenets of being on this planet in community with others that are non-negotiable. I don't think we should be killing each other.
Right.
That's pretty simple. I don't think we should hate each other. I don't think we should be unkind to people we don't know. I think, you know, there are just basic core things that isn't up for negotiation, particularly when separating people is relying on us not taking a side. It's being weaponized. I covered a murder trial. A woman murdered her father and was acquitted. She was a white woman and in a small town, and she was a Christian woman and was acquitted. And I came back to the newsroom and I was crying. And you know, the seasoned reporters were, you can't cry, you can't take a side, you can't. No, I don't ever want to be in this space of telling people stories and interviewing people and accepting the most vulnerable parts of their lives and not give a shit. I want to cry if it is sad. I want to feel something. I want to be mad. And I really have to wonder, if Amy Goodman was a man, would it be called journalism and activism? Or would it just be she's a real good journalist?
Yes, thank you for saying that last piece, because that touches my heart. I come from New York, so listening to Amy Goodman every morning was, you know, my life for a very long time. So love her, glad I came out today. I wanted to point out something. I do have a question, but I do want to point out when you had mentioned Jeremy Scahill, when he first started with Amy Goodman and he was cutting out the little articles, Jeremy Scahill also wrote Dirty Wars and a very guerrilla-like journalism. And obviously he was influenced by Amy Goodman. There's also a documentary that came out with that, Dirty Wars. So I just encourage everyone to look into that. My question is, just to go back to the truth, again, very good question, because we are being bombarded every day with all these huge headlines. Everything is in your face, wherever you go, whether you're on your phone or you're watching TV or what have you. And everything's very hot right now, right? And we're going through a lot. And so I don't turn on my TV to watch CNN or Fox News, any of these news channels anymore. I just don't. I do, however, will watch someone like Don Lemon or Joy Reid, obviously Amy Goodman, and I find myself going deeper and deeper into independent journalism. And is there any thought to how you do journalism and what's happening now? Because I feel like that's really popular right now. And yet Amy Goodman set that tone, obviously, but I feel like it's taking these other turns, it's becoming bigger, and it can be overwhelming, although I like to be well informed, but it can be very overwhelming. So where do you stand now? And I think you've answered some of that just now, but where do you stand? Like, where do you see it going at this point?
I remember when you know, you would turn on the news and it would actually, cable news, whatever the channel is, and you would actually see the full picture of the news and, you know, the biggest stories that are happening in the country, and then, of course, with cable news, it became a lot more partisan and just kind of whatever the big, controversy at the White House is, and the entire program is on that, and then of course I understand the fatigue because, I obviously try to keep up with the news as well, and when it just gets so bitter and people are so entrenched and they're just arguing on whatever your cable channel is that you're watching, it just makes my blood pressure go up, and I don't really feel like I get anything out of it. I think I don't have the perfect answer for your question, but I think what you're seeing and what you value in the independent journalism sources that you're consuming, those are, I feel like we share those values, and that's, we would never do this, but there are easier ways to do our business and perhaps get more readers and make more money by going that route. But that's not that's not what we do. And I think it's on us to earn your readership. It's on us for you to feel like we're essential to your life in some way. It's on us to be having conversations with you regularly in the community, and then it's on us to obviously earn your subscription, which I'm happy to hook anybody up in after the show.
Well, I want to say thank you to Zach and thank you to each of you for your insight and wisdom. We have to wrap it up now for the next screening that's happening. But thank you for joining us for this one.